I'm at Victoria Park in the heart of Hong Kong. For the past 2 decades, this is where the biggest political events in the city took place. From 1997 to 2019, on 1st of July, people gathered here in Victoria Park and marched towards government headquarters in demand of political freedom and democracy. For the first 5 years, the protest was relatively small in size, running only a couple of thousands each year. But things changed in 2003. In response to the government attempt to legislate for Article 23, a legislation that is meant to protect national security. 500,000 people took to the street, and it worked. The 2003 National Security Bill was shelved. Over the course of nearly 20 years and 4 chief executives, even though every single one of them said they are going to explore the possibility of legislation during their terms, none actually do. Turns out, although it's clearly written in our basic law that the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region shall enact laws on its own to prohibit any act of treason, secession, sedition, subversion against the Central People's Government, it didn't actually say when. So, Article 23 becomes this awkward topic that every administration has to deal with. They know they can't do it without facing enormous backlash, but they also can't just ignore it because it is written in our constitution, after all. Even though the temporary goal was achieved, the objective of achieving democracy is still in the horizons. So, for nearly 2 decades, on 1st of July, the anniversary of Hong Kong's handover, the day would start with a ceremony here in Golden Bauhinia Square, where high-ranking government officials would celebrate Hong Kong's return to China's rule. And in the afternoon, merely 500 meters away from the square, hundreds of thousands would march the streets in unison, asking for democracy among other demands, concerning topics like environmental protection, LGBT rights, workers' rights, etc. For many, the March of July 1st became an annual event to voice whatever is wrong in the past year and demand changes. If you spend a few hours on the nearby footbridges, you can get a pretty good idea of the social and political issues that people cared about. It's not from a detached official source, not from a government spokesman in a air-conditioned room, but from people out on the street under the summer sun, where temperature could easily surpass 30 degrees Celsius. It's not just a day for big, well-funded political parties, but also for small workers' unions, environmental organizations, and all other groups in the society who wanted their voice heard. Rallying tens of thousands every year is of course no small feat, worthy of the name of City of Protest. But what amazed me is the degree of tolerance displayed on 1st of July. At 8 in the morning, the chief executive gave a speech about how proud he is to be part of China, and that we are connected to each other more than ever, both physically and emotionally. Then, on the same day, on the street only half a kilometer away, we can shout from the bottom of our heart how stupid government policy have been for the past year, how much we wanted to elect our own chief executive, and most importantly, what people wanted for their own future. It's the day that we demonstrate tolerance. Even though we don't agree on everything, we don't have to be at each other's throat either. Even during the Occupy Central movement in 2004, the general atmosphere is relatively peaceful. Then a tragedy happened in 2018 that would trigger the first domino. In February of 2018, Chen, a Hong Kong teenager, murdered his girlfriend during their trip to Taiwan. By the time Taiwan police have identified their suspect, He has already escaped back to Hong Kong. And because there's no extradition agreement between Hong Kong and Taiwan, Chen can potentially get away with murder. Okay, before we move on, I want to clarify that Hong Kong do have extradition law, but it does not apply to, quote, the Central People's Government or the government of any other part of People's Republic of China, which will have to include Taiwan. Otherwise, you risk opening another can of political worms. No one in the right mind would do that. Okay, side note over, back on topic. In April 2019, Hong Kong government proposed to amend the existing extradition law, mainly so that it applies to any region outside of Hong Kong, mainland China included, meaning Hong Kong citizens could potentially be brought back to mainland China for trial. Naturally, opposition arose in the following months. Protests escalated in June, and finally, on 1st of July, before dawn, protesters gathered here, near the government HQ, and clashed with the police. By noon, they are trying to force their way in the Legislative Council complex. Some sensible pro-democracy council member came and tried to defuse the situation, because they know what happens when you don't tolerate, when you don't accept compromise, when you push too far. They have seen the result 30 years ago. By 4 p.m., many of those who joined the 1st of July march took a detour to join the crowd in front of the Legislative Council complex. At this point, the die is cast. It's all over. By the evening, protesters broke into the building and completely trashed the place. This photo of the Legislative Council would be the start of a new era. An era where there's no tolerance. In the following years, both sides constantly escalate their arsenal and actions, ending up with families torn apart by political views, a lot of people hurt, even deaths. Since then, the July 1st march has never been the same. The 2020 march was opposed by the police department, but some people went regardless, which quickly descended into conflict. By 2021, most groups that would have organized the march were outlawed. Whatever small effort that remains were shut down due to public health concern. Only minor protests occurred in other areas. Today's date is 1st of July, 2022, 25 years after Hong Kong's hangover. Only half the time of what former Burma leader then promised, that Hong Kong will retain its lifestyle and social structure for 50 years. Today, Victoria Park is quiet. The streets are empty. For the first time in 19 years, Hong Kong falls silent on 1st of July. I don't want this video to be a simple timeline of events or biased political critic about how our government and the CCP sucks. No, you can find plenty of both online elsewhere. I wanted to warn against intolerance in our political climate. Compromise is always part of politics. It's about giving grants while giving some others, until reaching a verdict that all parties can accept. It may not be one that they are entirely happy with, but at least one they can live with. It wasn't ideal. It never will be. But it was the best we can manage. For the past few years, we seem to be gripped by a frenzy. It's blue versus yellow. Hold your grounds. Give an inch, they will take a mile. Don't stop. Don't compromise. It's 100% or nothing. And now, see where it took us. The goal for democracy is further away than ever. Most pro-Democrats have left the Legislative Council. Migration number is now at a decade high. 2022 marks the first year without 1st of July march, without June 4th candlelight vigil. The pro-democratic discourse has been silent. The only narrative that is left defines years of political disputes as the work of anti-China troublemaker and misguided teenagers. With the former head of the Security Bureau now as the new chief executive, I can't see this narrative going anywhere anytime soon. And it honestly saddens me. The sight of 500,000 people filling the street here under the summer sun, asking for what they think is a better future, that might never happen again. And it could be the single biggest loss in our city since the turn of the century.